Hello, Wargamers. I'm Mr. Wargaming, and today I'd like to talk to you about the humble light cavalry armed with bows. In the real world, this is perhaps best exemplified by the Mongol warriors. On my tabletop, these are represented by wolf-riding goblins. With bows, they fulfill the same battlefield role. Hit and run skirmishes. They are designed to harass and harry the enemy without directly engaging in melee. Over the past few months, I've been trying to make these kinds of units work, and I have struggled with it for a variety of reasons that we're going to talk about today. I was called out by a couple of commenters. Vic, Tag, I love you guys. You're not entirely wrong, but I think we need to delve a little deeper. So rather than lightly touch on this as part of an ongoing battle, I felt that light cavalry armed with bows deserved a video in its own right to analyze how they worked in the real world and why it is so difficult to translate that onto the tabletop. Let's start with the simplest model that we can. We have two units on the table. You can have speed, offensive power, or defensive power. Pick two. The 15 human spearmen have opted for offense and defense. These are heavy spearmen with a lot of punching power and heavy armor, but they are very slow. The horse archers have opted for offense and speed, which means they can move a lot faster than these guys. And because they can reach out and touch someone at a distance, if they can stay out of melee, they can just ride up and shoot and ride away. And staying always just out of charge range, pepper these guys until they have completely been demoralized and chased off the field. Maybe that happens after the first casualty, maybe at 25%, maybe they have to get 50% casualties. Doesn't really matter. The point is, they are meant to harry and harass this unit. And to do that, all they have to do is circle around, take a shot, and circle back around. And if they can do that forever, these guys are doomed. The spearmen have no hope of ever catching these guys, particularly because their bows have a longer range than the infantry's charge distance. But there are a couple of things that these humans can do that will help even the odds. For starters, they can anchor their flanks on the river on one side and rough going through which the horses are slowed considerably, perhaps a cliff, a mountainside, or even the edge of the table. And even without these terrain features, when we expand the scope of our little experiment to a full-blown miniature wargame, there may be a solid line of troops. Most tables are not large enough to incorporate the vast swaths of areas off to the flanks in which this unit of light cavalry can make its big sweeping motions to get before they get back into the action. There's only so much room on the table. One of the other things the humans could do in this scenario is put archers, human archers, with a slightly longer range. That range only needs to be more than the movement range of these light cavalry. If these archers can now catch the cavalry out here on the flanks, it significantly reduces the ability of the light cavalry to create the maneuvers that allow them to stay safe from the charge of the human side. So that's the real secret. Bring some friends, secure your flanks, you don't have to worry. But we still have the fact that these light cavalry can move vertically. They can move in, take a shot, and move out before the humans can come to grips with them. Maybe. And here's where we start talking about how most rules fall down. The problem here is that the light cavalry have bows, and they are meant to be maneuverable, whereas a human unit, a foot unit of shooters, is meant to stand in one place. In order to balance the infantry bowmen with the infantry footmen, we say that the shooters either have to move or shoot. They can't do both. Alternatively, they may suffer some form of a penalty for moving and shooting on the same turn. And then to balance the foot with the cavalry, we say, well, the same thing must be true of the cavalry. So now you have a cavalry unit that is already smaller than the human foot unit that is suffering a penalty because it's shooting when it moves, or it has to choose to move or shoot. If it moves to within bow range, it's now at significant threat of being charged. We see this in a game like Dragon Rampant, which includes a skirmish order that gives the horse archers a possibility. Let's get this guy pointed the right way. It gives these cavalry a chance to fire with reduced effectiveness and then back off a little ways. So they can move up on their turn and shoot. And when the infantry attempt to charge, maybe they can take a light little shot and scoot back out of charge range. Maybe. It becomes a very high risk proposition for a unit that is already balanced in a lot of other ways to then have to have a coin flip as to whether their ability can be used really does negate that ability and hamstring it and make it very difficult to operate. When you combine that with the fact that the table is only so wide and there's a lot of terrain blocking them from those maneuvers, you really do limit the power and ability of these light cavalry to do what they do best. In the real world, the Mongols did really well when they had wide open spaces to fight in. I should preface that or put a little asterisk. The light horse archers did well when they had vast open sweeping plains of the steppe. Put them in a forest, not so great. Not to say the Mongols didn't do well in mountains and forests, but it wasn't the light cavalry that were doing the heavy lifting in that case. So just for all of you Mongol files, there you go. Okay, there's a little asterisk. I know you guys love them. Give them props. They did some good work, despite all the issues that they had. All right, so moving off of the Mongols. Now, here's the other thing that you have to understand about why these light cavalry don't work so well in most miniature war games. A big chunk of the maneuvering of a war game occurs in turn zero, by which I mean the deployment phase. A lot of the maneuvering, a lot of who's going to be where in the line happens before the game even begins. Now, I consider deployment to be part of that pre-game movement. It is movement that we just don't see. The camera hasn't been turned on, literally in my case, figuratively in yours, until the troops are within just a few moves of each other. We get our guys on the table. They're about one move in. That's your deployment zone. Likewise with these guys. And then to keep things interesting, we've abstracted all of that pre-fight movement. And now we have a case where on turn one and turn two, maybe by turn three, we're already to the center of the table. So in addition to confining the ability of the light cavalry to maneuver out on the flanks, we've done away with that. Narrow tables, terrain on the table, we're filling it up with units. Not only that, but by the time turn 1, 2, 3, 4 comes around, our light cavalry are now penned in. They are hemmed against the backside of the table. In a real world battle, in most cases, there could be a river there, I get it, could be mountains, could be heavy, dense woods that are hard to get through. But for the sake of this little thought experiment, if we have the vast steppe plains, these guys can fire and retreat infinitely. When we have a finite table, you lose that ability, and suddenly what happens in our miniature war game no longer reflects the real world. The strength of light cavalry has been eliminated just because of the geometry of this model that we have created. When you put all of that together, the result is a situation that presents some intractable problems. The things that you need to do to give light cavalry back their strengths mean that you are weakening regular archers. These light cavalry, if the game is designed around them, become superpowered. They become OP, and there's no reason to take anything else. When you limit the ability of the light cavalry to be on an equal footing to everyone else on the table, suddenly, because of the outside of the rules, because of the nature of the beast, they become far weaker than they could ordinarily be. Not going to say it's impossible to solve. I'm just going to say it hasn't really been fully solved yet. Now, all of this is very generic. I'm not being terribly specific here. Let's zoom in and look at some numbers. In the case of Dragon Rampant, shown here, our light cavalry can move 12 inches, very maneuverable. We don't have to worry about such things as wheeling or formations. It's a warband game. However, these light cavalry have a maximum range of 12 inches. If they are firing beyond 6 inches, their ability is severely restricted. Instead of hitting on 5s, they're hitting on 6s. The only way to get the full impact of their shooting is to close to within, move distance of the very guys they're trying to avoid. So they have a very difficult choice to make on a regular basis. Dare they get close enough to be fully effective, or do they stand off? And as we mentioned before, if the foot do manage to close with our light cavalry, there is only a slim chance they can get away. They're going to lose this fight, even if they have softened up the foot before that melee occurs. Very difficult. In the case of chainmail, things get even worse because we now have to worry about our horsemen. Now, granted, they can move a very long distance. At 30 inches, they are pretty much the fastest unit in. At 24 inches, they are pretty much the fastest unit in the game. However, their missile range is just 18 inches. And of course, as you can see here, our heavy foot have a charge range of 12 inches. To make matters worse, if they want to move, fire, and then move away, that's going to involve some turning, isn't it? As you can see, if they want to turn about face, that's going to cost them half their movement, meaning they can only cover 12 inches of ground, meaning they can only move 6 inches up, fire, and then move 6 inches away. That becomes a problem when the guys you're trying to harry and stay away from have a charge rate of 12 inches themselves. You have to stay very far away. You have to be very precise about how you move in order to take advantage of your harrying fire. You can limit your liability by coming at your opponent from an angle. I only have to turn 90 degrees, meaning I can move more like 9 inches at a time and 9 inches away. The problem with the geometry here is that it's going to take you a turn or two to maneuver back into position where you're facing the right way to repeat the process. And in a game that only lasts 10 turns, having to spend 2 turns off doing nothing cedes all of the initiative to your enemy. You bought speed so that you could maintain the initiative. You've just given up one of your key advantages. There is, however, one last mitigating circumstance that I myself have sadly neglected, and that is the concept of the firing arc. For foot-mounted archers, the firing arc is generally 45 degrees off the center. It looks something like this. Most of what we've been talking about today assumes that the firing arc is similar for horse archers, but that is not the case. Their firing arc for each figure runs at a 45-degree angle. They can fire 45 degrees to their right and 180 degrees to their left. In fact, it might even be something more like this, depending on how you read things. What that means is that our horse archers, if they can maintain that 18 inches away from the enemy, they have the ability to fire from this position. And as our poor foot sloggers grind their way forward, can fire once, twice, and then perhaps even a third time. And of course, our foot unit has the same difficulty. Just pivoting to chase after the horses is going to cost them enough movement that our horse archers are going to be well off to the side and perhaps get 4 to 5 turns of shooting instead of just the 1 or 2. The ability to fire over such a broad arc really gives the light horse the punching power they need and that I've neglected. With the 24 inches of speed, they're going to be able to take 1 or 2 turns and ride along the frontage, that whole long line of enemies, just peppering units one at a time, so that when the backup units, when the actual ground pounders for the horse archers arrive, or perhaps the medium cavalry arrive, these foot units are going to be in big trouble. They're going to be sadly weakened. They're not going to be as effective as they might have been had they not been harassed, harried, and weakened by the light cavalry, who are doing their job by simply wounding and demoralizing while the hammer blow approaches. There are a host of other factors to consider. The best thing you can use to counteract light cavalry is more light cavalry. If our spearmen had a light cavalry unit of their own, they could harry, harass, and scare these guys off. Better yet, medium cavalry. You don't need to catch these guys, you just need to threaten them. You just need to keep them at bay long enough for the spearmen to secure the victory points and the objectives of the battle. The best strategy is bring more guys than the other guy. I'm not going to say it works every time, but generally you can't go wrong with it. There's other things to consider. Every battle is unique. Every terrain set is unique. Every order of battle is unique, and I haven't really covered everything. Like I said, it's just a light overview. Make sure you read the comments because we have some really smart guys. As I said, this is largely a response to some of my commenters and some deeper thoughts that go beyond what the comment section is meant for. This is not so much a rebuttal or a defense as it is an expansion upon some ideas that guys like Victor Marriott and I think it's Victor Marriott. It's Vic Marriott and Tag 1080 presented in the comment section. Leave one of yours. Maybe I'll respond to it in a fun little video like this. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope it sounds better. I have a little lapel mic. Here, I'll tap it as my lights go out, so it looks like I need to replace my lights because they're, or maybe it's nightfall, so the goblins are even in better stead now than they were at the start of the video. Either way, I think I've said my piece, giving you guys some stuff to chew on. Give me something to think about down in the comments. I really appreciate it. Till next time, guys, I am praying for you. Oh, wait, before we go, I just wanted to mention one other thing. I know that in my recent playthroughs of the old Lords of Wonder and Ruin, a couple of those, I was using the Hellmarch Archer rules. Remember that these videos are often recorded 2 to 3 weeks ahead of time, and then I have questions and I ask guys over on X or other social media sites, and they set me straight, and I think, uh-oh, I'm going to get it wrong 2 more times because it's already in the queue. That's what happened with archery here, but, we'll get it right in the next game. That's pretty much life in general, right? Get the mistakes out of the way now so we can get to the good stuff later. Maybe someday later will come. It's going to come here because we're going to play some more of, if not Hellmarch, definitely the old Lords of Wonder and Ruin. I don't know that I'll ever play Chainmail again. This is just the same game, but it's just so much easier to use. Even the wonky archer section. Okay, now for real, guys. Until next time, I'm praying for you.